Hi, welcome to Pottery Northwest's online content. I'm Executive Director James Lobb, and I use he, him pronouns. We're going to be presenting our first ever online exhibition and showcase, UnWedged 2020. This was presented and recorded on October 9th of this year. And before we begin, I just want to make sure that you're aware of our fundraising efforts. As a nonprofit, Pottery Northwest relies on donations in order to create content like this online showcase and to carry out our mission of excellence in the ceramic arts. We value gifts of all levels, and every dollar makes a difference. So please go to potterynorthwest.org to make a donation. Thank you. Since 2010, Pottery Northwest has been holding a national juried exhibition called UnWedged. We receive applications from all over the country for this show, and we ask a well-known ceramic artist to jury a cohesive exhibition that represents the breadth of work that's happening today, from sculptural and functional work to traditional and experimental. Past jurors have included Julia Galloway, Josh DeWeese, and Patty Warshina. Our 2020 juror was Liz Quackenbush. Liz has worked both as a studio potter and in academia. She's a professor emeritus at the Pennsylvania State University School for Visual Arts, where she taught for over 20 years before stepping down in 2018. She has an extensive exhibition record, and Liz has done residencies at places like the Kohler Art Center, the Watershed Center for the Arts, and the Archie Bray Foundation. And she was the 2019 Pottery Northwest Jean Griffith Fellowship Artist. And of course, she's also a phenomenal potter. She makes lovely pots that I personally have admired for a long time. And she's also a very recent addition to the Seattle arts community. We couldn't be more thrilled to have her here in our city. So this is a phenomenal showcase. Liz discusses the exhibition piece by piece, which is a real treat. This isn't something that you would get if we had this exhibition in person. So please enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. This is a little bit nerve-wracking, but a great experience, and I'm really happy to be a part of this event. Pottery Northwest has been incredibly good to me. It was the welcome wagon for me when I arrived here in Seattle, and they really opened the studio, and it seemed as if everyone's hearts also opened to me when I arrived. It was an amazingly unpolitical environment where people were just warm and helpful, and I encourage anybody who needs a studio in Seattle to look into working at Pottery Northwest. I have nothing but great things to say about it. I want to thank Pottery Northwest and James and Chanda for this opportunity for me to look at a lot of work and for helping me put this show together, as well as to helping me put this presentation together. I certainly couldn't have put this Zoom together without their technical help. And so I really enjoy jurying shows that exposes me to a ton of different kinds of work, from all different approaches to working with clay. And that's what makes it interesting, is just seeing how different people look at work, think about work, and think about the material and translate whatever they have to say through this material that I have loved for a long time. I started making work when I was 15, work in clay, and I have been doing it ever since. I'm 62, so it's been a long time, and I just keep discovering new ways of working and new problems to solve and new things to wonder about in my own work. And part of that has to do with teaching. And all the questions that I found myself asking students and trying to help them figure out what they wanted to say in their own work. So it's been great for me. The teaching thing and the looking at work and the learning about what other people make has really expanded what I find possible for myself. Okay, so let's start looking at the work in the show. That's what we're all really here for. I broke the work down into 3 categories, and the first group is narrative, work alluding strongly to a story. The second group is figurative, and that's strong reference to human without telling so much of a story, and abstraction, which is denoting an idea, quality, or state rather than a concrete object. So starting with the narrative, I just wanted to explain sort of where I'm coming from with this. I used to have an assignment that I would give my students when I would start a narrative assignment for them. And what I would do was I would show slides of work, and I would tell the students that I would say, okay, Joe, now it's your turn. You have to tell a story that you make up about this image or pot or sculpture, whatever it was. And so these are sort of stories in some cases that I'm making up to go along with whatever we're looking at. Before we start looking at the images, I would like to apologize ahead of time in case I mispronounce somebody's name. I've tried to go over it and really tried to work it out, but I'm a little nervous and I don't really know how to pronounce all these names, so I'm doing my best. Also, please also forgive me if I misinterpret your work. I think that all I can do, I've done an extensive amount of research, really looking at everybody's websites and looking at their artist statements and trying to figure out where they're coming from. But I also think that it actually comes down to what we bring to art when we're looking at it ourselves. And so really what you're here to hear about today is sort of where I'm approaching the work. So both of those things will be involved in the process. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is an early piece of my work, and the first 3 slides here are just to show you some of the things that I've made over the years. So I'm just going to move through those. And then I'm going to start with the Stack of Pancakes by Abrams. This piece was the first piece that caught my eye when I started reviewing the work. And I immediately was drawn to it. I certainly do like pancakes, and especially with a big load of butter on top. But what really made me appreciate this piece was how direct it was, how it doesn't really have any kind of pretension to it. There's no pretense. It's just really diving into ceramics with sort of that kitsch history of making a jar for your kitchen that represents something you really love to eat, and just to have it there as part of the fun of the process in the kitchen, which is to feed other people and feed yourselves, and to find it a nourishing and inspiring place for food and community. And so here's a big stack of pancakes. Obviously, Alice has made many stacks of pancakes. She's got all the little bubbles in the surface. You sense the gravity of the pancakes. There's not a ton of stuff that I'm sure all of you aren't seeing about these pancakes that I'm seeing about these pancakes. But I think that I just appreciate how honest it is in terms of what it is and how it was made. Clay can mimic many things, and it can be sort of a chameleon, and here it's being food. And certainly she isn't the first person to make clay into food. The next piece is Promised Land by Spencer Bengay. This piece is also mimicking another material with clay. This float at the bottom of the piece has this beautiful sense of almost like a really old leather or old rubber kind of a float. And on top of it is this beautiful tray. And obviously this is a political piece. I translated what's written on the bottle, and although the piece is called Promised Land, what the text actually says is Forbidden Promised Land. The piece employs like 3 different, what I see, 3, maybe 4 different approaches to ceramics, where the bottom area is literally looking like a float. The upper layer is decorated with the tray around the rim is decorated with kind of a Chinese pattern of wave decorations, so water and wave decorations. And it's interesting how he has this tap on that part of the of the pot where it's just painted water, but then there's a real three-dimensional, looks like a casting almost of a spigot. Then inside the pot or the tray, we have the cups and the bottle. Now, I love to decorate pottery, and so I see all the traditions of decorative pottery, sort of the approaches, the formal qualities of those on this bottle, where the neck is decorated with a barbed wire pattern that's turned into this beautiful sort of arabesque-like pattern, and then there's a wire snipping tool that's decorating sort of a punctuation on top of that barbed wire. The triangular pattern of the fencing is really interesting to me. I think on this side you can see sort of like a ghost shape of a figure that's kind of like the invisibility of these poor people who are trying to get over the border but just can't get through. I find this really, really full of meaning, and it's hard to not get sort of swallowed into what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? I find that really interesting about the piece. I think that the knob is sort of this stop, this red hand holding up in the stop position and sort of what's stopping them. The cups are the occupants and the bottle is the dream, except the decorative says no. You know, the decorative says forbidden promised land, you're not allowed. And so the bottle is sort of like what they would all share. It's almost like the water you can't have, or the drink you can't have, of the nectar of something like that you wish you could have, but you can't have it because it's out of reach. You know, there's a lot of political work being made today, and I think it's great that in this show, a number of people applied with it and found inspiration in their work to voice those kinds of concerns. This is another piece that seemed relevant today. It's You Can't Keep Her Down by Patricia Haas. And I found this piece very disturbing. First off, the figure has no legs. It's just sort of rounded at the bottom, and that seemed incredibly sad to me. Then there seems to be some kind of a scar on her breast, which I don't know exactly what that's about, but that seemed really scary too. And it's on the left side, which maybe refers to the heart, but maybe it's just like a breast cancer scar or something else, I don't know. And then I find it particularly interesting that she has lipstick on. To me, it seems like she's putting forward her best face. However, you can't get beyond the fact that she's been through a lot. And sort of the way that the clay is even handled from the bottom to the top, where at the bottom it's all smoothed over, but the closer you get to the top of the piece and the face and the head of the piece, there's more texture to the clay. It seems as if the reality of it all becomes more and more in your face, so to speak. So anyway, she's looking out, but at the same time, I really get sort of swallowed into what's going on internally with this figure. And that's where I think it really succeeds, is this invitation into sort of the soul of the person, even though she's looking outward. So there's a lot of struggling implied in this piece, and it's one that I found I really, really respected. Now, this piece by Sophie Kendall is interesting to me. I've certainly been part of a women's march and experienced that kind of crowded individualism where all kinds of people are there wearing all kinds of crazy things and fun things, and also like it's a fun-spirited thing, but it's also very serious, and there's hopefully everybody represented and you're all packed in. You're seeing all kinds of important signs that are really clever, but also, you know, it's really meaningful time, and sharing it with a lot of strangers that you realize you have a lot in common with. This jar I found captured a lot of what it felt like to be a part of that event. And this lid on the jar, that's the pussy hat, the pink pussy hat, I thought was really great, a great little topping to the whole thing. Anyway, I think that her work is interesting, how she uses the 2D and moves it into the 3D. And most of the effort to move it into the 3D is through the faces. And each face is quite individual. And so I found that to be interesting too, that the density of it and the decorative sort of transitions were interesting. But I also think it really captures that kind of everybody feeling like it's important to be there. She also made this piece, Family Dinner, which isn't as politically based, but I do think that it breaks the pot down into interesting layers where the bottom border has these feet that are underneath the table, and I sort of love the silliness of that and all of their funny shoes. And then there's the table, the checkered tablecloth that wraps around the pot, and that seems to be like the main border of the body of the pot. And then on the shoulder of the pot is where most of the food is served, and then around the neck is where all of their faces start to become like a 3D relief sort of a surface that comes out where they come into life. And some of them are just so funny, like this one with the white lips all around about to eat into this hamburger. I don't know, I just think that these are clearly inspired by her everyday life, and I love the candidness of them and how direct the information is to what she's putting on the pot. I mean, these are probably her relatives, and she probably could name all these people around this table with all their funny socks and their shoes, and she's probably dressed them as they appropriately would be needed to, would come to the party. Anyway, I love that kind of honesty in the work where there's a direct link to people and what they're making. This piece by Christopher St. John, Cat, Rabbit, Bones, is where the narrative for me becomes a little more vague. Now, I could create a story for me. I look at this pot and I think the bones look sort of like an X-ray in a strange way of the interior of this zombie rabbit creature. And that's something that reminds me of a pot that I saw that was a Mimbray's bowl, and there was sort of an X-ray of drawing of the interior of a rabbit on one of those that I recall. But the ears are so alert. It's really strange because it definitely looks sort of like a zombie. But the ears are alert on it, which I suspect, he's up to something. And then the cat is on the back of this creature, this rabbit creature, and the cat seems a little bit more whole and a little more cognizant. And then but it still doesn't, they all seem like there's something dark going on until you get to the little butterfly on the tail. And that sort of provides this hope to the whole thing, which I appreciate. I like the way that he picked away at the clay. It seems like it's kind of obsessively scratched at, where this form has not come out of so much wet clay working as just picking away at it, like scratching, like you might scratch an itch or something to make this work sort of reveal itself. So anyway, I find the finished layer of this clay, the dark surface on the clay, to be reminiscent of sort of a Japanese Hanawa figure, where they had funerary figures that were of animals. And so it's hard for me to see a figure like this without thinking of that tradition. Okay, this piece is another extremely straightforward piece. And after being in academia for so long, it's really wonderful to see all this straightforward work where people are making what seems to me to be really straightforward, where it's not full of subtleties, but it pulls off this amazing layered message. So anyway, in this piece, I see this creature that's going to a party because it's got the party hat. It seems as if it's being like in a wagon, like it's being taken to a party in a wagon. And yet just with a few brush marks, the artist has made it so that Marion Haig, she's made it so that it's clear that this creature isn't quite sure whether he's happy to be going to the party or not. It's all built with slabs, and it still comes to life. And often slab work can be incredibly sort of stiff and unlively, but this piece seems to get beyond that, and I really appreciated about this. It reminds me of Egyptian dioramas or toys that I used to see at the Metropolitan Museum of Art when I was a kid. My mom would take me in there and we'd look at the Egyptian art. It was always so fun because of the mummies. And they had a room full of dioramas of farms and farm equipment and chariots and toys, and all made out of clay. And of course, the wooden ones didn't survive all those years, but the clay ones did. And they've always fascinated me. So this reminded me of that experience. Here's a piece called Sky Horse by Anita Gasakova. Okay, Sky Horse. This is sort of not so narrative. It's figurative without so much of the narrative falling into it. For me, this horse looks incredibly proud. It embodies sort of the pride of royalty. It seems to be part of a procession. My husband was raised Russian Orthodox, and so I've seen a lot of Russian Orthodox imagery, and this looks like a part of a Russian fairy tale. It's got such a wild hairdo, including its tail do, and the neck is sort of cobra-like to me. And so I wonder, you know, what kind of a place would this piece belong? It seems highly decorative, like a truly decorative object that would belong in a house that needed this kind of decorative object. And you know, it's a beautifully conceived piece, and that seems to be sort of the essence of it, is that kind of a stylistic goal. Kind of that high drama, like flames sort of coming over the top with that cobra head moving forward. Okay, so Mimi Miles made this piece that's called Brave. And at first I wasn't sure what I thought about having an Indian head that looks sort of aged, because I feel like it's an image that I've seen so much of. But I looked again at it, and I love how the thrown clay is used in such a sensitive manner as to create that kind of plasticity of skin and aged skin. The back of the piece really sold me on it, where there was this other mysterious face off the back of the head. I was surprised because I was interested when I was younger in these Janus figures where it's looking both forward and backwards. And I thought, oh, is this some sort of a response to ancestry or some kind of nod to ancestry? Like you can't get away from where you came from. I love how it's kind of hidden in the back. She also made this piece, which I also find really interesting. First thing I thought about was Venus of Willendorf. And then it made me think more and more about how it doesn't have the same solidity as the Venus of Willendorf. It captures that fertility, certainly with the broad hips and the large breasts, and but it seems so much more vulnerable. And especially when you see it from the side view, it's almost collapsed. And it's so sad, but it represents, you know, so many women's struggles. And especially now I see it as both the struggles that women have been through, but also the struggles that the earth has been through. This represented not just, at least I believe this represented, not just the female figure as a fertility figure for humans, but also the fertility of Mother Earth. And, you know, there are struggles now on many levels, and so this piece seemed incredibly pertinent. And the way that the clay is handled seemed to really pull the idea off and give it great depth. Okay, I'm in the Mood for Love by Cindy Liu. This piece immediately reminded me of work by Rudy Audio, except the vessel part of it is gone. So it's got the figure moving around the head, but it is not a vessel. It's really just a, or not just, but it is a figurative sculpture or a bust, where the bulk of the piece is actually a hairdo. And so being that it's in the head or above the head in the hairdo, made me think that the piece is probably about sort of the subconscious. What is this person thinking? And then when I noticed that the hands are on the cheeks, I thought, oh my gosh, it's sort of like being embarrassed of your own thoughts, going, oh my, you know, what am I thinking? And sometimes I think that that happens to a lot of us, where we're thinking something and kind of caught by our own wandering minds, and sort of embarrassed by ourselves and go, oh my, now I don't know what exactly is embarrassing about this thought. However, it does sort of make me think about embarrassing thoughts. And I like that about it. And there's a good shot. That one's sort of embarrassing. And maybe the red also represents the heat of that thought. Okay, this piece I immediately fell in love with. Improbable Beauty and Afraid of Nothing by Shelley Fredenberg. Now, I don't really know what the title is or has to do with, and so I'm going to let that go. But I do find the piece quite beautiful. It's obviously been through some kind of an atmospheric firing. It looks to me as if ash has settled all over this piece. But the way that the ash settled, it almost looks like dew or pollen has fallen on this piece. Almost as if it's like some kind of an homage to this creature, something that you might find in the woods that someone had tucked away in order to pay on an homage to an owl that once lived there, or some kind of great respect for nature. I've been interested in the past about how do you use camouflage to decorate an animal? How exactly do you decorate an animal? And it seems as if the surface of animals, including owls, is so much about the environment that it lives in. In this case, you know, it's trying to blend in with bark, and a normal owl is a live owl, is trying to blend in with bark and trying to blend in with dried leaves and all the stuff that sort of embodies the world that it's from. In this case, it's putting the flower on the face to define the features of the face, the eyebrow sort of area and the crown on the head. And then it looks also like a moth, and maybe the moth is like wrapped around the backside of the owl. I find this piece very subtle and also very clear, and just the grace of it I'm very attracted to. I think this piece is very beautiful. Okay, now this one is where abstraction starts. So I'm sorry I didn't delineate where we went into just figurative work, but now this is where the more abstract work seems to start within the presentation I'm doing here tonight. This piece, Influenced 22 by Quackenbush, is very, very sexy piece. And it is a porcelain pod. So pods, to me, represent fertility generally, because usually they hold the seeds for the next generation. So they are sort of inseparable from that. But the red lips on this little seed on top just seem like they're driving the sexuality of this piece home. It seems as if the piece is sort of a sexy cradle for this genitalia, which is just, the whole piece is kind of ripe with all these pores that are open. As a potter, I want it to be a sauce boat, and I feel like you should be able to open it up and find it full of red caviar or fig sauce or something yummy and delicious, and also is full of eggs, as the piece is sort of suggesting. Somehow these drips on either end of the piece seem like perfect invitations for some kind of a spoon. And even the lip of it, I could see the whole lid being lifted off and finding it full of something delicious. And that's where my mind goes with it. But technically, obviously, this is a really beautiful piece. Okay, this is Oyakada's Murmur. Now, I don't know what Oyakada is, but I find the piece quite intriguing. It's made by Lynn Sayers, and I come to it looking at it, okay, there's a vase form. First thing, it's sort of a traditional, almost Greek-looking vase form, where the narrow base lifts off to this wide body that's fully swollen and then comes back in and has the flared rim. However, in this case, Lynn has carved away at the piece to make it look as if it's kind of cracked open, and then spent a lot of time creating this meticulous texture on the interior of the piece. It seems as if it's kind of inhabited with some kind of a parasite. So it's kind of scary, and definitely isn't necessarily like a decorative piece. It's much more of a metaphorical piece. And there's, like the previous one, just with a few gestures, you can really suggest a lot with clay. And I think that this piece does it. The piece before this, this other one, let's see, also certainly does it. I guess, it's revealing something. This opening to the inside is revealing some kind of a deterioration, and it's kind of a sad piece. Okay, now this piece is made by Jessica Chang, and it's Where We Belong. And somehow I do identify with the title to this piece in relation to what I'm looking at on the screen. This form I find incredibly comforting. And it looks like a cocoon or a cradle to me. That's sort of reiterated by the sewn threads that are put across the opening on the piece. I find it interesting when a couple of different crafts are either referred to in ceramics or are brought to the actual material. So here she's bringing some kind of a mending to the piece. The threads remind me of mending because they're putting lines across and then sort of weaving from the opposite direction. And that's how a lot of mending, like replacing some fabric that's worn, is done. And then she's also going back in, Jessica's going back in and then decorating with stitched lines. So not all of it is thread. Sometimes she's referring to the thread through the painted line. Let's see. The next piece, so this piece I find very comforting and sort of like you want to crawl inside there and it seems like a safe spot. This is another piece by Jessica, and in this case, it just seems super cheerful. And as if this one that's called Curiosity is not so comforting, but really fun. And so I find this one in the color palette and even the way that everything is so uplifting is really a fun piece. And it's amazing how sort of the same basic elements can be transformed into a whole new experience by how they're juxtaposed. So the color is super cheerful. The thread is just delineating shapes on the piece. The negative space around the piece is crucial. So all the space that surrounds this piece sort of gives the piece its tension, where it's pushing visually against these two lobes to create this kind of rubbery feeling thing, as if it might like expand and jump out if that pressure changes. I love when ceramics sort of has the feel of something else, whereas this is a fired solid piece, but I get the sense that it could move, that it could be jiggled and rubbery, which I find really, really intriguing when ceramics crosses that line. Almost as if it can become undone. I also like in this slide how it shows where she painted this black hole on it, and you can see that black hole that's painted, but also there's the part where it's an actual hole in the piece. And so there's these two things working together, where one is the illusion and one is the reality, just like the thread work is doing. Okay, here we have a piece called Tube Change by Tony Kucha, or Kuchik. Kukic. That's going to be the part that lives on, is me trying to pronounce these names. Okay, so I look at this and I'm trying to think, okay, what is he doing here? And I'm really looking hard at this piece and thinking, okay, well, I'm seeing a little bit of a crate. So I see this rectilinear form that's falling apart. It's a familiar form. Looks like it's sort of strips of wood that once were hammered together into kind of a crate form. And then I think, well, what are those things on top? And I'm like, oh, well, maybe it was housing those at one point, where it was like a rock and a tube of some sort, like a hose that were in the crate. And then the whole thing is taken apart and dissolved and recreated to be this thing where the same elements are used, but in a whole new beautiful way. The glazes are gorgeous. They're rich and luscious. There's beautiful edges to them. And it's a really fun sort of a puzzle to figure out on this one. Whereas what was it and what is it becoming? And I like how the crate has become the pedestal for the contents, where the crate seems like it was holding these things and now they've kind of taken charge and are standing on top of it. And so there's something fun about that. And that might be what's going on. I'm not, I really don't know what was going on in Tony's mind. But for me, it's fun to kind of create a story to go with that, just that little narrative. And obviously every part of it is very luscious. He also made this piece, Brûlé Respite number 6. Again, I have no idea what that means. Although I find myself curious about this blue rock that's wedged between these two trees. They're all very stylized, and I'm interested in that. But also, I wish I could see a little bit more of this drawing on top of the piece. Because this show is virtual, I can't really take a deeper look. And that's a little bit frustrating in this piece for me, because I can't really see exactly what it looks like, some kind of animated machine kind of a thing is going on the top in that drawing. That looks like it took a lot of time to do that drawing on top of there, but I can't really make out exactly what's going on, other than that it looks like there's something pumping maybe. And anyway, I wish I could see more of that image. This piece, Constructed Form by Eric Hoffer, is interesting to me. It's a chaotic pile of stuff. To me, first glance, I think about my son's toys. When he was young, at the end of the day, I'd pile them into a bin. It was everything from the kitchen sink. It was balls and blocks and pots and pans and all kinds of stuff all thrown in there together. And so this seems sort of like everything from the kitchen sink sort of humped together in there. Now, it's got this black line that delineates everything. Every edge is delineated. There's a couple of extra black lines just that are sort of more decorative or creating shapes within other shapes. But for the most part, the black line really delineates every shape. Now this summer, I have another little story to tell, but this summer I was in Vermont and I was driving down our hill in Vermont, and at the bottom of the hill, there are these two beautiful trees, and they were full of gypsy moths. And they looked as if they were really clear. It was a beautiful, clear day, but where the gypsy moths' nests were, it looked like a smudge where they had, all the color had been diffused, and it was almost a spot where you could look through the tree, or it seemed like you were looking into another dimension in these couple of spots on this tree. It was so interesting. So when I looked at this, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if just a couple of those areas didn't have this black line, so that not everything was delineated and maybe some new shapes that didn't actually physically exist were created out of that elimination of the universal logic of the whole piece. Now, this is happening a little bit on this other side where these faces and sort of body parts are referenced. And I really respond to some of that, but I like it when I look at work and I think, what would I do? What would I do differently? Or what would I do to, obviously it would be making it my own from my experiences. So that's different than what Eric would do from his experiences. But I do like that it enlivened that engagement with me as the viewer. This piece, This to That by Russell Orlando, is really a pretty sophisticated piece. It seems like a reconstruction of an assembly of parts. Even though I know he built this stool that the piece is sitting on, or that's part of the piece, I like the idea of making a stool into a pedestal. I really love all of the line drawing on the piece, how there's the wire that's drawing a line, but he's also using the same kind of a line that exists from the wire to navigate the piece and sort of circumnavigate the piece and keep your eye moving around the piece. It's also coming through in the rim of the piece. And so there's a lot of different sort of drawing elements to this piece. And the idea that a ceramic, three-dimensional ceramic piece can also be a drawing in space is really interesting to me. I find these black lines don't just sit on the pot. They sort of hover in between, almost off of the surface. And that's really appealing to me. There's something very physical about this piece. And really, I respond to all the different ways that clay is used, where the screening is kind of dunked into kind of slip and then fired maybe, or glaze, and then it's wired to the piece, and it's all sort of holding itself together. Anyway, I'm interested in this piece as constructive and as drawing. Okay, this piece, Chroma Teapot by Dan Molyneux, is something that I find interesting because it takes random forms and tries, or does, create something that is familiar. It's a teapot, Chroma Teapot. Now, when I first looked at this, I didn't think teapot. I just thought it was another piece put together of many shapes. But now I sort of see the opening of the teapot and then maybe a spout of the teapot. What interested me most about this piece, strangely, was the opening at the end of this spout thing. I don't see it as an opening at the end of a spout. I see it as an opportunity for more parts to be added. It looks almost like the plug for a socket, as if it would be the place where two joints would be made. And I find that part leads to things that aren't already part of the piece. So it's like an unfinished story. And that I find interesting. As a potter, I'm interested in pots that function. However, this one seems like part animal and parts that were just random and put together. And then it's all sort of enveloped in glaze, kind of as if it's all held together by this luscious greenish brownish glaze. Anyway, that piece on the end of the spout I find very curious. This piece, Unnatural Nature series, survival game by Quack. I find interesting for a number of reasons. I've seen her work where it's been an absolutely perfect form, where she's used this technique and the piece has held up beautifully. And really, the piece, the form is perfect and there's no slumping and no cracking and everything is just going absolutely right. And it's a technical achievement. This piece seems as if it's really embracing all of the accidents and problems that can happen with ceramics. And so it's sort of allowing us into the potter's world. And I think that it's wonderful when we make observations that happen in the studio in the way that things are either next to each other or bump into each other or reinvented through firing. And we see the qualities sometimes in those things, and the work then goes off in a new tangent. This piece seems to capture that moment where it looks to me like it slumped perhaps in the firing, the glaze dripped, maybe it got too hot. And so this idea of survival game, this idea that you're using a technique that is invariably going to fail maybe most of the time, but some of the time it will survive perfectly. Yet these other pieces are all part of the narrative, all part of that conversation that this piece has with the process. I find really, really very interesting. So unnatural nature, it's almost like talking about how I'm trying to do something, or she is trying to do something with the clay that is totally unnatural to the clay, where it's surviving despite there being too little clay, too little, or trying to survive, and then this survival game. And so I really, really respect the idea that she has put in hours and hours and hours to this piece, assembling all these little nodules, and then knowing that there's a very good chance that it is going to slump, and maybe that is the life that it's exhibited with this piece. Okay, this piece, Woman in Garden Blue by Ariana Heinzman. Now this, to me, seems like another fertility goddess piece, although very different than the one earlier in the show. It seems like a very odd floral piece. It's got wide hips, narrow waist, and a very full bodice. This one is not vulnerable like the other one was. Instead, it seems like a fabulous corsage. And so I guess, it just seems to be decoratively so stunning and sort of fantastic in its outward celebration of fertility. And that kind of unaffected cheerfulness is really nice to see. Okay, Floral Dripwear Jar by Dallas Wooten. This piece has a beautiful surface to it. There are many layers. There's sort of a floral thing that's going on underneath the glaze. It's doing the trick where the drip is created and then it is sort of dripped over with glaze. There's the carving of the flower. There's multiple layers of decoration going on this to give it a really rich sort of lily pad-like thing that's going on the surface. And then there's this beautiful peach blossom glaze on the surface, or copper red blush. That seems to make this piece just like totally ripe, like a peach. And that ripeness that's on it, where it's sort of like green on one side and yellower and red on the other side, is like that idea of how does something become ripe over time? How does something ripen up? And then these drips, that idea that it's so ripe that it's just oozing, like my tomatoes were all split this week and just oozing juice from them, that kind of a thing. You know, when you touch a fig and it just starts to collapse in your hand. It seems like that's what's going on the top of this pot. A beautiful form, wonderful knob, great lip on this pot. There's a lot of real strong parts of the pot, but the metaphorical parts of that upper area and this, again, you know, contrasted against the stark part at the bottom is really working for me. Okay, here we have the Cantha Basket by Marge Levy. Now, Cantha cloth is traditional Indian cloth where the fabrics are stitched together to create layers of sort of quilted fabrics. It's hand stitched, and so I can see the reference to that fabric and see the reference to the stitch. However, for me, this piece is, excuse me just a second here, okay. This piece is much more about water and waves and tides and that kind of ebbing and flowing of water, and maybe I sort of sense this, that if I were in a boat inside this basket, I'd be being tossed around and sort of holding on for my life. It looks as if it's very turbulent water and you know, full of that kind of motion of the sea. Yeah, so anyway, I think it's very celebratory of water and happens to have the Cantha cloth thing as part of it also. But I really appreciate the way that it's in a basket. That elongated form seems perfect because it's also boat-like, but it also sort of stretches in one direction and the other and allows these waves to kind of slosh back and forth across the surface. And this one big wave that's splashing up and becoming the handle, I think that's a wonderful solution for a handle. So good for you. Go Marge. Okay, here are two quite different than Marge's work. Two jars by they're Prussian blue jars by Courtney Michaud. And these two pieces remind me of onion domes on an Orthodox church. And because of the glazing, I kind of imagine them as seeing them sort of in really early morning when it hasn't even gotten light yet, or late at night where you might see these domes through fog. I think that the glazing is incredibly sort of climate atmospheric kind of a thing going on, where you're sort of get caught up. I get caught up in, you know, what time of the day is this? What time of how much moisture is in the air? What kind of clouds are in the sky? Is the moon about to peek over the edge? What's going on that way? And then this little bronzy sort of gold knob on these is so beautiful at the top. These pots are really distilled and every single detail is super important. So the silhouette of these pots is super duper important because that's really what there is, and then the surface. And so they kind of, almost the form encapsulates, almost like a snow globe, where it encapsulates this environment of things sort of drifting by. And I find them very magical in that way. Okay, this piece, Oval Vase 1 by Jake Brodsky. Here, a different kind of distillation happens within the pot. Whereas Courtney's on the previous slide, they have this weight to them towards the bottom, but they also seem like the rims are horizontal and the base is horizontal. And so there's this sort of comfortable area where the weight is sort of pushed to the bottom of the pot and you get that tension sort of pushing down from the lid. But their pieces don't look like there's a great plasticity to them. They seem very formal and distilled. Whereas Jake's seem as if they're much more, the plasticity of the clay is much more a part of the statement. I get it both in the pot, mostly in the rim of the pot, as well as in the handles, where the handles look rubbery and sort of pulled down, and the lip looks as if gravity has taken hold and affected that. So it's sort of slung like a hammock across the top. Now, this pot, for me, absorbs all the light. So I see the profile of the pot more than anything else, and the negative space around this pot is really important. It's crucial to sort of creating that tension between the swelling and the slumping at the rim against the atmosphere or shape of the air around the outside of the pot. I think that the glazing on this pot also adds to the way that I read the pot. I've looked closely, and maybe all of you can take the opportunity at some point to look closely. It's got sort of a softened orange peel kind of a surface, and the dappledness of the surface is sort of adds to that kind of rubbery feel of the skin of the pot. This is the other side, and I guess there's a little more texture on this side. So these are soda fired, and that variation is very subtle, and I think that that's a good thing. Okay, here we have 4 plates by Hane Bayless. These plates sort of embody a lot of what it means to be a potter. I find that they're extremely energetic, and most of his work sort of has this great energy to it, where the pieces are charged by the maker with that kind of excitement of what am I making. The process is apparent. That seems like crucial to the whole finished product. The plates are cut, joined, darted, supported. The plates are carved to give these sort of 4 like axial lines going from the center outward. The rims are pushed with a rib to kind of get them to fold over to give a kind of lip to the surface. Then the decorative blue line is applied on the outside of the piece. At least that's how I would imagine doing it. Then they're glazed, and then there's gold luster applied and fired again. And so it all seems to be done with really quick movements, and they capture that kind of vitality of the maker. Okay. So here we enter the part of the presentation where the award winners are presented. So we have 3 honorable mentions, a director's choice, and then a piece that is my choice for first place. And we're going to start here. Jake, congratulations. I hope you're there. And this piece got one of the honorable mentions. It's a different pot. It's oval base 2. And I really love how it's upright, even more so than the other one, and yet still has that kind of tension, and even more so for me, the tension of the gravity on the lip of the pot. Whereas also the handles in this one are kind of pushing down on the shoulder of the pot. I'm very drawn to the leathery sort of darkness of the glazed surface, and respond strongly to that as a surface that could experience metaphorically that kind of sense of stretch as the pot is inflated with contents or liquid of some sort. So congratulations. This piece, Camouflage You by Soo Jin Choi, is my second choice, not really second place or anything, they're all equal, but another honorable mention piece. And what most intrigues me about this piece is the area in the middle where these drawn green lines outline leaves. I find that detailing to really draw me in. The rest of the piece is soft, sort of in terms of the line quality, and a little bit blurry, but that clarity of that line really captures my eye and makes me want to dig into that area and look deeper. And when I do, I can see that I'm looking right through those lines to see the face peeking through. I also love that one leaf that's just above the eye to make it a little bit harder to catch the eye, where it looks almost like a drawn eye. That one leaf that's horizontally demarcating the leaf, the lines are demarcating the leaf just over the top of the left eye. So I really appreciate that part of the piece. And this work, I find interesting how she's using this two-dimensional slab over this sort of 2.5-dimensional, almost 3-dimensional face, and trying to get those two things to work in relation to each other. Also, the idea of peeking out from behind something, and how do you get something to happen like that with an opaque material like ceramics is really interesting to me, almost making it into glass. So congratulations, Soo Jin Choi, for honorable mention. Okay, this piece, River Burial, is the third of the honorable mentions, and by Madeline Dubin. And I find this piece to be refreshingly untraditional. It seems as if Madeline really plays a lot with raw materials. And in this case, named River Burial, it made me think about how clay deposits are often found on either historical or current riverbeds, and how that kind of dragging of some kind of a very small particle down the river and then depositing it along the bank of the river is what creates these river clay deposits, is somehow involved in this piece. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I'm bringing to the piece. So I thought, what if she took this piece of fabric, canvas, and then buried it down there, and this is the clay deposit that happened on that piece through that process. I don't know if that's what happened. I find it interesting that she sewed the bottom edge of this piece. I sort of see it as some kind of a symbolic shroud. The idea of river burial, it seems so sad, the idea that there would be some kind of end to the existence of the river. I mean, burial for me implies death or ending, or maybe it's about sort of the next life, but I don't know. I mean, the tones of it seem a little bit ominous also of this piece. So this piece really leaves me with many more questions than answers. And I'm moved by what's here, and yet I don't really know more by looking at it. It just makes me question a lot about the potential of clay and what she's trying to say here. So this piece seems more about learning than about knowing. And for that, I really, really respect that piece. And so congratulations to Madeline for River Burial, another honorable mention. Congratulations. Now at this point, I'm going to hand it over to James, and he is going to give the Director's Choice Award.
Hey, thanks, Liz. We're still in control of the slideshow, so I'll let you advance that.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
So I chose this piece by Tyler Quinton. This is what I thought was my favorite piece in the show, and I'm not going to be as nearly as eloquent as Liz has been in describing, what I think. And
thank you.
But first, I just love this the traditional form, this vase form that he's made here, but because it's a very volumetric form. But then he's removed all that volume by making it out of these tiny little, I don't know if it's slip trailed or just little bars of clay. Can you go to the next one? Because I think it's a
Sure.
close up. Yeah, and it just seems like very, meticulously made. It's kind of brave to do something like this out of clay, where you're really kind of pushing the boundaries of what the will accept. It just seems so fragile. And Tyler is, I've admired his work for a few years now. He's, this is actually, I think, his second or maybe third UnWedged that he's been a part of. And I don't know, Liz, if you knew that or not, but he was in last year's show, and I was surprised when I unpacked the work, how solid. There was a piece that was very similar to this one, but how solid it felt, and it didn't feel, holding it and moving it did not feel as, the piece did not feel as fragile as it actually looks. I didn't test that to see how fragile it actually is. I was still treated it very delicately, but I kind of admired the strength of it when I was holding it in my hand. So congrats to Tyler. I'm gonna disappear now.
Thanks, James. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the directors, or not directors, the Jurors Award. And that award is going to Hane Bayless for this piece, which is the Gravity Wave Cups, drinks with 8 friends. So there's 9 cups there. I guess one is for Hane or for whoever owns this piece, and the rest are for his friends, or that person's friends. These cups are so well conceived. I just really think that they're fabulous. Each one is a cylinder, basically, in its most basic sense, sort of perfect form for lots of decoration. It's been used throughout the ages. It makes me think about Italian pieces I've looked carefully at, where they're just cylinders and they're covered with fantastic decoration. And it just allows for the decoration to do its magic. So they have a little tiny pedestal around the bottom that sort of elevates this canvas that stretches around the top. The lip is just curled a little bit to sort of end, sort of frame that decoration, but also to invite use. And then the pots themselves just leave plenty of room for Hane's decorative impulse, which is a strong decorative impulse. Let me see what else. Oh, the way that the decoration is applied is sort of a number of different variations. We've got the crayon-like line of the blue and green, and then there's the gold leaf, which looks to me like it's a sheet of decal gold leaf that he's cut up and reapplied with lots and lots of little strips of this gold leaf all over the piece. Now here are 9 different examples of the exact same decorative tools being used, in really starting with all stripes, and but using them in all these different ways. Gravity wave cups, I mean, that's as good a name as anything. For me, I don't have any kind of scientific knowledge about gravity waves, so I don't really go into it that way, but it seems as if these gold lines in particular are dominant. They are the ones that are sort of jumping out at me and are dancing across the surface, and the rest of the lines, the blue and the green lines, are kind of like the background lines. They seem like they're not the stars of the dance. And so there's all this different movement. It'd be a great way to have everybody know which cup they had, but also be part of a set. Anyway, I think that they're really, really fabulous cups. Vigorous, I think I wrote they're a vigorous play within the restrictions of really functional pottery, which reminds us that invention is possible with or without boundaries. So, I think pottery is often discussed in a way that it's full of limitations. And I think that this piece shows that those limitations are freeing in many ways, and that a lot can happen within the boundaries of pottery forms, and the playfulness is exhibited right here. So thank you, Hane, and congratulations. You are my first choice.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to visit potterynorthwest.org or text Clay Lives On to 202-858-1233 to make your gift today. Thanks.